Hey, welcome, fellow human beings, to the podcast Addiction, Abuse, Recovery by Matt Logan Speaks. I am Matt Logan. However, I'm not going to be your host. Our host for this podcast is Sherry Irvin, who has personal, unfortunate experience with addiction and abuse, but she has been in recovery for more than 8 years now. Part of Matt Logan Speaks, we want to just share other people's stories in the hopes that it will help you through your day, that it's just another tool in your toolbox to get you through the day. So please help me welcome your host, Sherry Irvin.
Hi everyone, my name is Sherry Irvin. Welcome to Addiction, Abuse, and Recovery. With me today, I have a special guest, Melissa Rebultan. Melissa is a woman that is living a life in long-term recovery. And she has taken it a step even further, and she has become a peer recovery specialist at Recovery's Happening in Rochester, Minnesota. Mm-hmm. So welcome. I'm so excited to have you here today.
I'm really excited that you had called and asked me to have this opportunity.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. It is I'm so happy that you agreed to do it. So my first question to you is if you could share a little bit of your journey and how you got to where you are now, and then we'll follow up with a few more questions. But if you could just tell us how your journey started.
So my journey started in a little town outside of Ames, Iowa. The town is called Boone, Iowa. I was one of 6 girls. I was the next to the youngest, and my sisters took care of me, and they were quite a bit older. And I remember kind of the time that everything seemed to start falling apart, and that was like 1974. They all kind of left one right after another, having pregnancies, moving out, and I felt like some abandonment. I wasn't really close to my parents, and it's not that they weren't good parents, it's just that I didn't have that connection with them. My grandfather died, and I remember watching everything as if I was like an outsider looking in, like I didn't feel part of our family. I was just really lost. And I started drinking alcohol. A friend of mine, Mary Kay, her dad owned a big hotel in town, and that's where the railroaders and the bikers would come in and drink. And her and I were like 12 years old, and we would play behind the counter. And we'd also sneak back in the bar, and get that good old alcohol, And what happened from that point is there wasn't enough alcohol for me. And I would do anything to get a drink. And I would put myself in dangerous situations with older people. And most of them were men. And I didn't see anything wrong with that. I loved the attention that they gave me. And as long as they had alcohol and the party was on, I just quit even going home. It was like on my 14th birthday, my parents had lured me home with buying me 7 bottles of Annie Green Springs Plum Hollow. They didn't like that I drank, but they knew that if they had a party for me, that I maybe would stay home. And the next morning, they asked me to go for a ride, and then they told me that I needed help, and they went and took me to a psychiatric unit. And I was really, really confused. I had admitted that my brother-in-law had been molesting me, and it was like it didn't matter, And so, as a child, it was 14. As a child, I was like, why am I getting all these punishments? I didn't see drinking being wrong. Everybody drank, And from that point on, I was so disconnected, and I had this alcoholism that was so intense in me. I manipulated a man that was in the psychiatric unit. He would go home on weekends, and we were in a locked facility, and I conned him into bringing me vodka. And so I was able to drink inside of this place, and they said that I was just a defiant teenager. And so from that point on, I was on the run. They'd put me in this place called Shelter House, and I met a guy there, and we took off in the middle of the night, and we ran off to Rochester, Minnesota. And I drank, and it was just nothing but a big party scene, and I still didn't feel like I belonged anywhere unless I had a drink. And from that time, I had a son, my son Wayne. He became part of our life that first year. I moved back home to my parents, of course, because I'm a teenager, going to have a baby. And my parents allowed people to come into our lives that they were not necessarily real pleased with, but they never told me no. So I had my boyfriend at the time move in with us. On the night that my son Wayne was born, when I was getting out of the hospital, was the first time that I had my doors kicked in by federal agents, and I'd gotten a second-degree controlled substance crime, because that when you're drinking and you're using and you're a teenager, you have to do things in order to continue living that lifestyle. And from there on, I'd gotten out of the charges because I was a teenager. However, I was getting drugs from a bike club in town, and we were getting death threats from them. So my parents moved Michael and I back up to Rochester to his parents' house. And when we moved back up, it wasn't very much longer. I found out I was pregnant again for my son Lance, and I couldn't quit using. I was smoking weed, didn't see anything wrong with it. Nobody was really even saying, you're pregnant, you shouldn't maybe be drinking or smoking. So his parents had a lot of money, and they really didn't want us living in their home, so they had paid our rent into this house that we moved into. My son Lance was born, and in that house we had parties all the time, and we were like 18, and we had a nice house and hung out with a bunch of people that liked to do keggers, and so it was our home. And then one evening we had a party at our house, and the kids were in bed. The next morning I'd woke up, and it was like 10 o'clock, and I'm like, my son Lance didn't wake me up. And so I went down, and I told Wayne, I said, you go get your brother up. And Wayne went down there. He was only 2, and he screamed and said brother was stuck in the crib. And I ran down and found my son had passed away in his crib. I didn't know how to cope with life, and every step that I took in this run, it just got worse and worse. I didn't know how to cope with grief. I grew up with family saying, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, Missy, and just move on. And, the more that I did that, the more stuff that I stuffed down inside of me, the more abuse that I allowed to happen to me. I just kept on a run, and it was a 30-year run, having more kids, dragging them through addiction, running from the police, running from the social services, and never feeling like I belonged anywhere. And by the time that I had gotten to this place that I never ever had been before, and I've been to a lot of places like, I want to quit. I just want to stop. I promise I'll never do it again. Only to, as soon as I would get out of that situation, immediately go right back to what I was doing, because I didn't know how to live life without using. That was my lifestyle. And so I was 49 years old. My kids were grown up. Wayne was in his 30s, mid-30s. My daughters were in their late 20s. And I have 14 grandchildren.
Wow.
And my son had called him, and he had been in recovery with Tiffany. They both went through the Wabasha County Drug Court together. And my car broke down, and they both came, and I was a mess. I had blood stains on my pants and my shirts because I was intravenously using. And my son was tired of seeing me. Tiff was really nice to me. She joked with me, you know. She treated me like a human being and not judgmental, and I felt that from her. Although I didn't think about quitting at that time. But I feel like I was getting set up with tools before I hit that bottom. And I started reading like out of the Recovery Bible. I was so desperate, you know, and I didn't know who God was. I didn't have it. He was the one that would get me out of jail. And I didn't even think about it was actually that prayer that got me out of jail, right? So I got to this place, and I could no longer go on the way I was living. I could no longer find a drug to take over the shame and guilt and my whole life. I couldn't find a combination of drugs. I couldn't find a man that was, you know, take me out or distract me, because that was another addiction of mine. Mm. And one night I was sitting in my room. I had a desk over in the corner and a light on just in the corner. The desk was covered with spoons, and my drawers were full of syringes, and I was so tired. I screamed out to God that I can't go on like this anymore, and I knew that I was going to die, and it was something that I'd never ever felt before. And I just hit my knees, and I was crying, and my room lit up. Like there was like this, the room just lit up like something, like the outside street lights had come on.
Oh, wow.
And it was like I could see everything going on, and it was just like this weird, it was calming. You know, it didn't make me quit using. However, it made me do things that I never did before. I walked up to social services, and I walked in. I knew about Rule 25s because I was really good at helping other people, you know, and I knew what you had to do to actually start the process of treatment. And so I went in there, and I just surrendered all the lies I had been telling everyone. And I begged for help. And then I left, and I'm like, what did you just do? You know? You don't let them secrets out. But it was like after that day of surrender, there was nothing that was going to stop what I needed to do, you know? So I ended up going to treatment. It took a couple of weeks. I was withdrawing off of morphine because I didn't want to go to treatment and withdraw there because it's horrible. It's horrible. You can't. You're in the bathroom and you're sick and vomiting and you're in so much pain. And I kept saying the serenity prayer. And, you know, like I thought about going to the dealer and going and get more, but I was so sick I couldn't even get in the car. That's how I know that prayer was helping me. And it was horrible. It was horrible. It was like 3-4 days of just sick. And I ended up going to treatment. Yeah. I surrendered. I surrendered everything. I surrendered the relationship that I was in. I surrendered his son, who I helped raise for almost 9 years. And I stayed, I was just going to do 28 dry out, And something inside of me said, you got to stay. And that's that little voice that started coming up when I surrendered. It's like, who is that? It is not me, because I'm a runner.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, fast forwarding, what made you become a peer recovery specialist?
Well, when I got out of treatment, I stayed in treatment for 4 months, and I was contemplating going back to that relationship that I'd left, and I ended up going to a camp out, and I was still in treatment, and I went to an NA, Narcotics Anonymous, camp out, and I still didn't feel like I was part of anything, and I was scared, and I was like watching, like I always felt like I was a watcher of my life, And I started seeing people like Tiff, like, she can't be sober and be like that. I'm like questioning all of this, because I thought if I put drugs down, my fun, my life was over, right? And I saw my son. He was bald. He was getting old. On the last day of the camp out, Tiff yells over and she goes, look at that. A mom and son having their first sober cup of coffee together. Because me and my son used together. And that was that voice. And it was coming in different forms. And I started walking down this lane, and I was getting ready to go tell Wayne I was going to move with Chuck up to St. Cloud. And I was walking up, and there was this road, and there was 2 lanes, right? And I'm like going straight up to talk to Wayne, and I started walking up, and Tiff was on the other road, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm like, Tiff, I don't know what to do. And I told her what I was contemplating, and she goes, you know what to do, Missy. And I did. I went home to Wayne's. I asked Tiffany to sponsor me, and we started working the steps out of Alcoholics Anonymous book. And I took directions from her even when I didn't like it. It was a very, very hard process. But I was done. Mm-hmm. And so we went through the steps rather quick. She's kind of pushy like that. She wants me to get anyone to... And she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and I didn't believe her. Mm-hmm. But she told me, she says, you need to show up in your life. And I took her guidance because I didn't know how to do that. So the first year was the most toughest part of my recovery. I lived out in West Concord, which is a town of about 400 people, and there was 2 meetings, 2 times a week. And my disease screams every day. And I'm like, how do I do this? She goes, just do the next right thing, miss. What's that? What's the next right thing, mm-hmm. right? So she gave me directions, and she said, well, there's a drug court every Thursday. You go sit in that. That'll take some of your time. And I ended up starting new meetings out there. I showed up in my community because I destroyed communities with my addiction. I robbed them. I took, I was not a good person, and I did not like that person and so I started just doing the next right thing in my community. Casey's store, I was telling them, hey, I'm an addict. I just got out of treatment. Yep, I'm a liar, but I'm working on that, because I could see all them defects, and if I hold them on the inside, that's going to keep me sick. Mm-hmm. And so Tiff had started Recovery is Happening from her house, and I just happened to be coming in, I think, on the 2nd year of what she was doing. And I took my story, I took my life story, and I started healing by sharing it with other women. And so the road I started on with sponsoring and stuff was a selfish one because I needed to heal and I needed to be reminded. And I need to make an amends to myself by helping other women. And I also need to make living amends to my children who are addicts themselves by showing them that I can be a good mother. And when Tiff had called me and asked me to take the academy, the Peer Recovery Specialist Academy, I'm like, oh, okay. I was working in Genio Turkey Barns, very humbling job. But I did learn a lot about myself in that job. I was still grateful that it was a job that offered me benefits and things that, like, I didn't think I could have. Like, I didn't. And so I went to the academy and took my week's PTO, which I never had a job with that either, you know. And I took the academy, and then I went back working and still was doing sponsoring and everything. Really didn't think much about what would happen after the academy. I didn't really think that there was a spot for hire or whatever. I didn't even really know. Because Tiff was like that. She would tell me to do something, and I would do it. And then I get a call from her, and she said, hey, we're hiring peer recovery specialists. Get your application in. And I'm like, okay. I took directions from somebody that saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself.
So, with the peer recovery specialist, what services do you offer to the still suffering? What is a typical day for you?
A typical day is I will meet with individuals. I get referrals from Stage by Stage Treatment in CASA, and I've worked a relationship with them. And they make referrals to us, so that's my first step, would be reaching out and meeting with an individual. And basically, I build a relationship with them, and I get to motivate them into finding their path to recovery that works for them. Mine may not work for them, but there's many pathways that we can help them motivate to find their place. And so I would just pick them up, and we would just build that relationship. I would just keep them accountable, or, and I would help them remove barriers that would keep us sick or keep us from achieving things that we thought was impossible, like getting a driver's license back or going to meetings, or maybe you could be a peer recovery specialist. Maybe you could take your past and help someone in this way. There's hope.
Absolutely.
There's hope. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So where do you see yourself in the future? Do you plan on going on for more higher education, or and also with that peer recovery, what has been the most challenging though?
The most challenging is watching people fall, and not taking it out on myself. Putting my passion is to help them, and I try to get them to see, their life in a different place, and I have to remember that they're not at that place where they can see. So that's been the toughest. And moving forward, whatever God has in store for me, I am perfectly happy with what I'm doing, but I've been praying. One prayer to God is, help me be of maximum service to you and our fellows. Help me to show up in their lives like nobody else has. And I trust him, because I never dreamed I would be. I'm coming up on 8 years. I own my own home, which took a lot of work. But I didn't think I would ever have that opportunity. Working with people, I thought that there was a time when I worked at a nursing home and they told me they'd have to lock me in the kitchen to keep the people safe from me. And so those are things that I really carried, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing to see where we were once at and where we're at now,
Yeah.
and to see that true miracle. And you know, it is nothing but miraculous.
Yeah.
You know, you had told me that you had over 30 years of hardcore,
Yeah.
just hardcore drugging, and now look. You know, you have like you said, you have a beautiful home. You have your husband.
I have a husband.
And you have dogs.
I have dogs. I have 2 great grandchildren who's never seen me high.
Wow.
And you know,
And how is the relationship with your children?
so I have a daughter who's in prison right now, and she loves me. Like, she loves me, and she comes to me, and she knows that I don't try to enable any of her behaviors, but I show her unconditional love, and I keep showing up. That's not something I did when they were small. So our relationship is really good. I pray that she comes out and gets on this journey with me, because I think we could be a powerhouse with our story. My other daughter, Carrie, she's in treatment right now, and I just pray, you know. I pray that they don't have as long a road as I have, you know. So, and then my son Wayne, he's just awesome. He has a really good life, and that's due to treatment. That's due to the drug courts. It turned him into a beautiful man, father, husband, grandpa, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember listening to your story of the past that your relationship with him was not the best.
No. My son got in trouble when he was 12 for stealing some old man's guns. And they came after him and they put him in a juvenile jail up in Des Moines, Iowa. And I never went to see him. You know, I just wasn't capable of showing my kids what real love is. However, today I show up. You know, we have really good relationship now. I have a good relationship with all my grandkids. Get to see them on weekends. They trust me with them.
Wow, you truly are a miracle within this program.
Thank you.
Very much so.
Yeah.
So you plan on just kind of staying where you're at? Wow.
I'm staying with Recovery is Happening. Tiff she's encouraged me to, I'm a certified peer recovery specialist, and I was just got a promotion. I am the reciprocal of peer recovery specialist, so I supervise and do supervision over 2 of the peer recovery specialists that works out in Dodge and Mower County now.
Wow.
So she's given me, yeah.
Wow.
We're trailblazers, man. You know, this is not something that was available to people in the past, you know. No.
How many counties do you serve in?
I serve in Dodge and Mower County.
Okay.
Steele County, if there's referrals. I was stretched pretty thin all the way over to Freeborn County. We still serve Freeborn County. However, we try to get the other peer recovery specialists that's over there. So we do serve Freeborn County, Steele County, Mower, and Dodge. Wow. Yeah.
Wow. That is so wonderful.
Yeah.
I just, I could talk forever with you about, it just kind of gives me shakes and goosebumps because I have been privileged to hear your story before, and I could listen to your recovery and the things that you have gone through. It is amazing the thread that we all share. The common bonds that we have. Our stories are different, but the common bond is there. And part of the reason for this podcast was that to show people that we've made some kind of bad decisions in our life, but we're also living testaments that we do recover.
Yes, we do.
We do recover.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Missy,
Thank
for
you.
being here. I really appreciate you doing that, letting your vulnerability out, the courage the courage that it took to come out of your comfort zone, to share some of those not so nice parts of addiction. Addiction is not pretty. Like I said, it doesn't discriminate on who it's going to get, and I truly believe that we all have that. If we follow a program of some sort, and we all know that there are many different pathways,
Right.
and but I truly believe that your higher power is working in you. You're doing amazing things. In recovery's happening, and I appreciate the fact that there's somebody like you there to that person that is just completely beaten down. They need someone like you. So I thank you for the service that you do.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks for letting me be part of your dream.
Oh,
We have done this road together,
yes, we have, haven't we?
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
What a
Missy.
blessing.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast of Addiction Abuse Recovery, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed it. I'm sure you did, as I did. I want you to know that if you want to follow along, just go ahead and hit subscribe on YouTube and Spotify, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Apple Podcast. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Just search out Matt Logan Speaks. We have all kinds of great content for you. Hit the notifications button so that when something new comes up, you're the first to know. Have a great day.